The funeral reception was winding down when my parents cornered me in the kitchen of my grandmother's house. I was washing dishes, trying to keep my hands busy while grief sat heavy in my chest. Grandma Rose had been more than family to me. She'd been my anchor, my confidant, the one person who truly understood my dreams of becoming a marine biologist. "Emma, honey, we need to talk," Mom said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when delivering bad news. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. Dad stood behind her, fidgeting with his tie, unable to meet my eyes. I turned off the faucet and dried my hands, already sensing what was coming. "What is it?" "It's about your grandmother's will," Dad began, then stopped, looking to Mom for help. "The thing is," Mom continued, "your grandmother, well, she changed her mind about your inheritance. The money she promised for your graduate school, for your research dreams, she left it all to the church instead." The plate I'd been holding slipped from my numb fingers, shattering against the kitchen floor. "What?" "I know it's a shock," Dad said quickly. "But you know how religious she became in her final years. She felt it was the right thing to do." I stared at them, searching their faces for some sign of deception. But they looked genuinely sorrowful, disappointed on my behalf. "But she promised," I whispered. "She said she wanted to help me get my PhD, to fund my research on coral reef restoration. Just last month, she said—" "Plans change, sweetheart," Mom interrupted gently. "I'm sorry. We all are. But maybe this is a sign you should consider something more practical. Your father's firm is always looking for bright young people." The rest of the conversation blurred together. Something about student loans, about being realistic, about how marine biology was a nice hobby, but not a real career. I nodded and smiled and said all the right things, but inside, my world was crumbling. 3 months later, I was drowning. Between my undergraduate loans and the cost of living, I was working 3 part-time jobs just to survive. My acceptance to the marine biology graduate program at Scripps had come with partial funding, but without Grandma's promised inheritance, it wasn't enough. I'd deferred for a year, hoping to save money, but the math just didn't work. I was sorting through a box of Grandma's personal papers that Mom had finally given me when I found it. A letter addressed to me in Grandma's careful handwriting, dated just 2 weeks before she died. "My dearest Emma, by the time you read this, I'll be gone, but I want you to know how proud I am of the woman you've become. Your passion for the ocean, for protecting God's beautiful creation, fills my heart with joy. I've arranged for your inheritance to be held in a special account at First National Bank. The account number is 4429876541, and the access code is Coral Dreams. You'll remember that's what I always called your research plans. Don't let anyone tell you your dreams aren't practical. The world needs people like you, Emma. Chase those coral dreams, my dear. All my love, Grandma P.S." The account should have $347,000 as of this writing. More than enough for your education and to get your research started. My hands shook as I read the letter 3 times. Then I grabbed my laptop and logged into the First National Bank website. I entered the account number with trembling fingers, then typed "Coral Dreams" into the password field. The page loaded and my breath caught in my throat. Current balance, $347,000. I stared at the screen until my eyes watered. The money was there. It had always been there. My parents had lied to me. Over the next hour, I scrolled through the account history. No transactions had been made since Grandma's death. But there was something else. A second authorized user on the account. Margaret Chen, my mother. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. They hadn't just lied about the inheritance being gone, they'd actively concealed its existence. My own parents had watched me struggle, had seen me defer my dreams, had suggested I give up everything I'd worked for, all while knowing the money was sitting there waiting for me. I called the bank immediately. After verifying my identity and providing the access code, I learned the full truth. The account had been set up as a joint account with my grandmother as the primary holder and me as the sole beneficiary upon her death. Mom had been added as an authorized user only for informational purposes. She could see the account but couldn't withdraw funds without my signature. But she could certainly pretend it didn't exist. I spent the rest of the night pacing my tiny apartment, fury and heartbreak warring in my chest. Why would they do this? What did they gain by keeping me from my inheritance? The answer came to me around 3 a.m. Control. As long as I was struggling, as long as I needed their help, I couldn't pursue my impractical dreams. I'd have to settle for the safe, conventional life they wanted for me. But now I knew the truth, and I was going to make sure they faced the consequences. I started with research. Over the next week, I documented everything. The account statements, Grandma's letter, even recordings of conversations where my parents continued to insist the money was gone. I also looked into the legal aspects of their deception. While they hadn't technically stolen the money, they had engaged in fraud by misrepresenting the terms of the inheritance. Then I began planning my revenge. Phase 1 was simple. I transferred the entire inheritance to a new account they couldn't access. I also applied for readmission to the Scripps program, this time with full funding for not just my degree, but for years of independent research afterward. Phase 2 required more finesse. I knew my parents well, their weaknesses, their fears, their sources of pride. Dad valued his reputation above all else, while Mom lived for social approval. They'd built their identity around being the perfect family with the successful children. I waited until the annual Chen family Christmas party, where all our relatives and family friends gathered to catch up and show off their accomplishments. It was Dad's favorite event of the year, his chance to network and brag about his children's achievements. I arrived fashionably late, dressed in my best outfit, carrying an envelope. The party was in full swing, with about 50 guests mingling in my parents' decorated living room. I spotted them near the fireplace, glasses of wine in hand, holding court with Uncle Robert and his wife Linda. "Emma!" Mom called out as I approached. "Everyone, look who finally made it. Our daughter, the future." "Well, we're still figuring that out, aren't we, honey?" A few people laughed politely. I smiled sweetly. "Actually, I have some exciting news to share." I had their attention now. Dad straightened his shoulders, clearly hoping I was about to announce some practical career development. "I wanted to thank everyone for their support during this difficult time," I began, my voice carrying clearly across the room. "Losing Grandma Rose has been heartbreaking, especially since she was so invested in my future." "She was such a wonderful woman," someone murmured, and others nodded in agreement. "She really was," I continued. "In fact, I just discovered something amazing. It turns out Grandma left me an inheritance specifically for my education, $347,000 to pursue my PhD in marine biology and fund my research into coral reef restoration." The room buzzed with surprised congratulations. I watched my parents' faces drain of color. "The interesting thing is," I said, opening the envelope I'd brought, "I found a bank statement showing the money has been sitting in an account all this time. Mom and Dad told me the inheritance was gone, that Grandma had left everything to the church instead." The conversations around us started to die down as people sensed the tension. "Emma," Dad said quietly, his voice tight with warning, "this isn't the time or place." "Oh, but it is," I interrupted, pulling out copies of the bank statements. "See, I've been working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, eating ramen for every meal, all because I thought I couldn't afford graduate school. I deferred my acceptance to Scripps because I believed my parents when they said there was no money. Mom had gone completely pale. "Sweetheart, you're misunderstanding." "Am I?" I held up Grandma's letter. "This is a letter from Grandma, written 2 weeks before she died. She explains exactly where the money is and how much she left for me. She even included the account information." The room had gone completely silent now. Everyone was staring at us, sensing the family drama unfolding. Uncle Robert cleared his throat awkwardly. "Margaret, David, surely there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "There has been," I agreed. "The misunderstanding is that my parents thought they could lie to me indefinitely. They thought they could manipulate me into giving up my dreams by pretending I had no way to fund them." "Emma, stop!" Dad hissed, grabbing my arm. "You're making a scene." I shook him off. "I'm telling the truth. Something you two seem to have trouble with." I turned to address the room directly. "My parents have been lying to me for months about this inheritance. They watched me struggle, watched me cry about giving up my career goals, and they knew the entire time that Grandma had left me enough money to pursue my PhD and launch my research career." The silence was deafening. I could see the shock and judgment on our relatives' faces as they processed what I was saying. These were people who valued family loyalty and honesty above all else. "Why would you do that?" Linda asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mom and Dad exchanged panicked glances. "It's complicated," Mom said weakly. "We were trying to protect her." "From what?" I demanded. "From following my passion? From having financial security? From fulfilling Grandma's dying wishes? From making a mistake?" Dad finally exploded. "Marine biology isn't a real career, Emma, it's a hobby. We were trying to save you from wasting your life chasing fish around the ocean." The collective gasp from our relatives was audible. Even for Dad, this was harsh. "So you decided to lie to me instead of respecting my choices as an adult," I said calmly. "You decided to deceive me about my grandmother's final wishes. You decided to let me suffer financially and emotionally because you thought you knew better." I looked around the room at the faces of our family and friends, people who had known me since childhood, who had heard me talk about my love for marine life at countless gatherings like this one. "Well, I have more news," I announced. "I've been accepted to Scripps Institution of Oceanography with full funding for my PhD. I'll be researching coral reef restoration in the Pacific, and I'll be using Grandma's inheritance exactly as she intended." The room erupted in confused murmurs and conversations. Some people congratulated me. Others looked uncertainly between me and my parents. Uncle Robert tried to mediate, suggesting we all sit down and talk this through privately. But I wasn't done. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out my phone. "I've documented everything. The bank statements, Grandma's letter, even recordings of conversations where Mom and Dad continued to lie about the inheritance being gone. I've also consulted with a lawyer about the legal implications of deliberately concealing an inheritance from the rightful beneficiary." Dad went white as a sheet. "Emma, you can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious. While you technically didn't steal the money, what you did constitutes fraud. You deliberately misrepresented the terms of Grandma's will to manipulate my life choices. There could be legal consequences." Mom started crying then, mascara streaming down her cheeks. "We just wanted what was best for you," she sobbed. "We were trying to protect you from disappointment." "By lying to me? By betraying Grandma's trust? By treating me like a child who can't make her own decisions?" My voice was rising now, months of suppressed anger finally breaking free. "I'm 22 years old and I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in marine biology. I've been working in research labs since I was 18, but you decided I was too stupid to know what I wanted for my own life?" The party had completely dissolved at this point. Some people were making excuses to leave, others were clustering in small groups, whispering about the drama. My cousins were staring at me with a mixture of awe and horror. "That's enough," Dad said firmly, trying to regain control of the situation. "You've made your point, Emma. Let's go somewhere private and discuss this like adults." "Like adults?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean the way adults discuss this with me when you lied to my face for months? The way adults handle things by deliberately concealing a dying woman's wishes from her granddaughter?" I gathered my papers and put them back in the envelope. "I'm leaving now. I have a flight to California tomorrow to meet with my new advisor and find housing near campus. I'll be starting my PhD in January." I started toward the door, then paused and turned back. "Oh, and in case anyone was wondering, the church never received any inheritance from Grandma." I checked. That was just another lie. As I walked toward the exit, I could hear the explosion of voices behind me. Questions, accusations, demands for explanations. I didn't look back. The next few weeks were brutal. My parents tried everything: guilt, anger, threats, promises to make it right if I'd just come home and discuss this rationally. They enlisted my aunts and uncles to call and lecture me about respecting my elders. They even had our family pastor reach out to talk about forgiveness. But I was done. I moved to California, found a beautiful apartment near the beach, and threw myself into my graduate studies. My advisor was thrilled to have a student with funding for independent research, and I quickly became involved in cutting-edge projects studying coral bleaching and restoration techniques. The legal situation resolved itself quietly. My parents' lawyer advised them that while they might not face criminal charges, a civil suit could be devastating, especially with the documented evidence I'd gathered. They backed down from any threats of legal action against me. The social consequences were more severe than I'd anticipated. Word spread quickly through our extended family and social circle about what had happened at the Christmas party. Several relatives stopped speaking to my parents entirely, appalled by their deception. Dad's business relationships suffered as people questioned his integrity. Mom was quietly asked to step down from several volunteer organizations. I felt a twinge of guilt about the collateral damage, but then I'd remember the months of struggling, the nights I'd cried myself to sleep thinking I'd have to give up my dreams, and the guilt would fade. 6 months later, I got a letter from Mom. She'd been seeing a therapist, she wrote, trying to understand why she'd acted the way she had. She admitted that they'd been wrong, that their fear of my impractical career had blinded them to the harm they were causing. She asked if we could talk. I wasn't ready yet, but I kept the letter. A year later, I published my first research paper on innovative coral restoration techniques. The work was getting attention from environmental organizations worldwide, and I'd been invited to present at an international conference on marine conservation. Dad called that night. His voice was quiet, different somehow. "I saw the article about your research," he said, "in the Times." I waited, not sure what to say. "I was wrong, Emma. About your career, about the inheritance, about everything. What you're doing. It matters. It really matters." "Yes," I said simply. "It does." "Is there any chance," he asked hesitantly, "that we could try to repair this? Your mother and I, we miss you. We know we destroyed your trust, but we'd like to try to earn it back." I looked out my window at the Pacific Ocean, thinking about Grandma Rose and her coral dreams, thinking about the thriving reef restoration project I was leading, funded by her gift and her faith in me. "Maybe," I said finally, "but it starts with the truth. Always the truth. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more trying to control my life." "Yes," he said quickly. "Yes, absolutely. It would take time, years maybe. Trust, once broken so completely, doesn't heal overnight." But I was willing to try, partly because I knew Grandma would have wanted me to, and partly because holding on to anger was exhausting. 3 years later, I defended my dissertation to a packed auditorium. My research on coral restoration had already led to successful projects in 3 different marine ecosystems, and I'd been offered positions at top research institutions around the world. In the front row sat my parents, looking older but genuinely proud. Next to them were Uncle Robert and Linda, along with several other relatives who'd supported me through the difficult years. After the ceremony, as I posed for photos with my PhD diploma, Mom approached me with tears in her eyes. "Grandma would be so proud," she said softly. "She would," I agreed. Her coral dreams came true after all. Later that evening, at the celebration dinner, Dad raised his glass in a toast. "To Emma," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for having the courage to fight for her dreams, even when the people who should have supported her didn't. For proving that following your passion isn't impractical, it's essential. And for teaching us that truth and respect are the foundation of love, not control." I smiled, thinking about the long journey that had brought us here. The betrayal had nearly destroyed our family, but in the end, it had also forced us to build something new and better. Something based on honesty and mutual respect instead of manipulation and fear. "To Grandma Rose," I said, raising my own glass, "for believing in coral dreams." As I looked around the table at the faces of the people I loved, complicated, flawed, but trying to do better, I realized that sometimes the most devastating betrayals can lead to the most profound transformations. Not just in the people who suffer them, but in the people who cause them too. The inheritance had given me more than financial freedom. It had given me the power to demand truth, respect, and authenticity in my relationships. It had taught me that my dreams were worth fighting for, even against the people I loved most. And in the end, those were the most valuable gifts of all.